The prairie was dying. Cracks webbed across the hard earth, like veins in brittle glass. Dust swirled with every gust of wind, coating fence posts, cattle bones, and dreams alike. The sun hadn't touched the land in days. Not really. It loomed behind a wall of steel-colored clouds, heavy with promise and threat. For weeks, the sky had teased rain. Today, it promised war. Luke Harrow stood alone on the edge of his land, shovel in hand, sweat clinging to his neck despite the cold front sweeping in. Before him, a shallow grave. Within it lay his last strong horse, Buck. Fell lame 2 days back, fevered and frothing. No money for a doctor. No feed left worth feeding. Just one bullet. Luke stared down at the still form, the wind tugging at his coat. Buck had plowed the first fence of this place when he and Clara came here 7 years ago. Now the horse was gone. So was Clara. So was nearly everything. The shovel clanged against stone as he filled in the grave, sky rumbling above, as if the land itself mourned with him. By the time Luke reached his barn, the first drops of rain began to fall, fat cold, and spaced like warning shots. He climbed onto his remaining horse, Hobbs, a temperamental old Mustang with a limp in his left rear leg, and rode out toward the western fence line. A gate had been down since yesterday. He'd seen it flapping from the rise above the creek, with his herd whittled down to barely a dozen head, each stray counted. Thunder cracked across the sky like a gunshot. Lightning flickered, and the air turned sharp with the smell of ozone. And then it came. The storm dropped like a curtain. Rain hammered the earth with sudden fury. The wind howled across the open plain, driving sheets of water sideways. Hobbs reared slightly, spooked by a nearby strike. Luke tightened his grip on the reins. "Easy, old boy. We just fix the fence and get home. That's it." But nature had no use for plans that day. Lightning cleaved a cottonwood not 30 feet ahead. The explosion of bark and steam threw Hobbs into a frenzy. The horse slipped, crashed sideways into the mud, taking Luke with him. His head cracked against a rock, stars bursting behind his eyes. He lay there for seconds or minutes, dazed, rain pounding his face. Then, a sound, faint, almost lost in the storm. A voice. He pushed himself up, squinting into the downpour. There it was again, somewhere between a sob and a scream, fragile and desperate. Luke staggered forward, each step sinking ankle-deep in muck. The rain bit at his skin like needles. His coat dragged heavy with water. He passed the shattered tree, crossed the broken fence, and followed the sound beyond the rise. And then he saw her, a woman, barefoot, mud-streaked. A tattered white dress clung to her figure like gauze on a wound. Her veil was tangled in the grass behind her, forgotten. She crouched low in the weeds, arms wrapped around herself, face tilted to the sky as if cursing it. She turned at the sound of his boots and raised a pistol. Luke stopped in his tracks. "Don't come closer," she shouted, voice raw from wind and fear. He lifted his hands slowly. "I'm not looking for trouble." "You are trouble," she snapped, wobbling to her feet. "All of you. I just want to help. Storm will kill you before anyone else does. I don't care." Luke stepped forward one pace, slow and careful. "Well, I do." Her grip faltered. The gun trembled. And then she collapsed. Luke caught her before she hit the ground. Her skin was ice, lips pale. Mud caked her legs and tore the hem of her dress. She was fevered and half-conscious, mumbling something about Charles and the vows and too late. He looked around, nothing but open field, black clouds, and ruin. No time to think. He hoisted her into his arms, cradled her close, and turned back toward home. Luke's cabin hours later. The fire spat and hissed inside the hearth, spitting embers from half-dry wood. The woman lay curled in a blanket near the flames, hair matted to her forehead, chest rising and falling in shallow rhythm. Luke knelt beside her with a rag and a chipped cup of water. She sipped it weakly, refusing food. He said little, just sat nearby, watching the storm batter the window. Later, when she slept, he took out his journal. Not a diary, just pages of his wife's sketches, her maps of dreams they'd had together. Orchards, greenhouses, windmills. She used to sit right where the stranger now lay, painting visions of a future neither of them would see. He thumbed a smudged drawing. Clara in spring, hair braided, belly round with the child that never took a breath. The room was warm now, but his chest still felt cold. He looked at the stranger. Even asleep, her face bore the weight of something deep, not just fear, something older. Wounds. She hadn't spoken yet. Luke recognized it, the look of someone who ran from hell and found another one waiting. Midnight, a creak on the wooden floor. Luke stirred, eyes still open. He'd been dozing in the corner chair, rifle resting across his lap. The woman, Eliza, she had murmured earlier, was up, wrapped in the blanket. She stepped softly toward the door. She froze when she saw the rifle. Luke sat up straighter, but didn't move. "You leaving?" he asked calmly. She didn't answer. He nodded toward the door. "Storm's not done yet. I've lived through worse. Maybe. But this land's got teeth. It'll chew you up before morning." "I didn't ask you to save me," she snapped. "No, ma'am. But I did it anyway." She looked away. Her hands clenched the blanket tighter. "You walk into that storm," Luke said gently. "It won't be fear that kills you. It'll be pride." She stood there a long moment, torn between fight and flight. Then she turned and sat back by the fire. Luke didn't speak again, just watched the flames dance across the stone. Outside, the wind howled louder than before, but inside the cabin, two broken people listened in silence, neither knowing yet that the real storm had only just begun. Clouds still hung thick, but the worst of the storm had passed. The rain eased to a soft mist, clinging to the grass like breath on glass. Inside the cabin, smoke drifted from the stovepipe, curling lazily into the still, damp air. Luke stirred the embers in the hearth and added kindling. A low flame crackled to life, casting amber shadows along the wooden floor. Behind him, soft footsteps. Eliza stood barefoot near the stove, her soaked wedding dress replaced with a flannel shirt that swallowed her frame and a patchwork quilt tied at her waist. Her face was pale, but her eyes held a guarded alertness, as if sleep hadn't dulled her fear, only disguised it. "I made coffee," she muttered, holding out a chipped tin mug like a peace offering. Luke accepted it with a nod. "Much obliged." They drank in silence for a long moment, the only sounds the hiss of fire and the distant cry of a mourning dove. "You can stay a day or two," he said finally. "Rest up, then figure out your next step." She didn't thank him, just stared into the cup, as if the steam might whisper answers. Trust is a slow fire. By midday, the sky lightened. Luke mended fence posts, while Eliza helped tend the barn, moving stiffly from the cold. She said little, her posture stiff and cautious. But she didn't run. That evening, by the fire, her voice broke the silence. "His name is Charles Baines," she said, fingers curled around the coffee mug again. "Big cattleman. Owns most everything west of the Red Hills. Twice my age. Smells like sweet oil and arrogance." Luke looked up. "My father owed him," she continued. "Money, land, favors, so he paid with me." Luke didn't speak. She smirked bitterly. "Baines called it a wedding. My father called it salvation. I called it a cage." She paused. Rain ticked softly against the window. "I ran before the vows, left my shoes in the church, and hitched a ride with a supply cart. Thought I could vanish into the storm." Her voice trembled. "Guess I almost did." Luke leaned forward, poker in hand, nudging the logs. "You didn't," he said. "Man versus self, Luke's walls." Later, she noticed the sketches on the wall. They were faded, but still vivid, ink and charcoal renderings of the land, the cabin, wildflowers and fruit trees that didn't yet exist. "You draw?" she asked. Luke shook his head. "My wife did." Eliza turned to him slowly. "What happened to her?" "Died in childbirth," he said quietly. 2 winters ago." She opened her mouth, then shut it. Luke set the poker aside and looked at the drawings. Clara believed this place could be something. Orchards, horses, chickens even. Said we'd grow it from the ground up. She saw color in things I only saw dust. Eliza traced a sketch of a grove, apple trees in bloom. "And now, I still see dust," Luke replied. "Man versus man, trouble rides in." The next day brought more than wind. A rider appeared on the hill, tall in the saddle, wearing a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat. Luke spotted him before the dogs did, already walking to meet him at the gate, rifle slung loosely in one hand. The man didn't dismount. "You Luke Harrow?" "I am. I work for Mr. Charles Baines. Heard there's a young woman might have come this way. Missing bride. Pretty. Brown hair. White dress. Name's Eliza Mercer." Luke's jaw tightened. He kept his voice even. "Ain't seen anyone." The rider scanned the land with a practiced eye. His gaze lingered on the cabin, on the barn. "Well, if you do see her, Baines is mighty anxious. Says she ran off with valuables. Reckon he'll reward whoever brings her back." "Can't help you," Luke said. "Now if you're done, I've got fences to mend." The man tipped his hat slowly, eyes still sharp. "You take care, Harrow. Weather ain't the only thing can turn." He rode off, without another word. "They'll be back." Luke came into the cabin, wet from the drizzle. Eliza sat at the window watching. "You heard." She nodded. "They'll be back," Luke said, voice low. "And next time, polite won't be part of the visit." Eliza stood. "Then I'll leave tonight." "You won't get far," he said. "They're watching the roads." "I'm not your problem." Luke looked at her for a long time. "I know." But he didn't move to open the door. Character bonding, shared scars. That night, the rain returned, softer this time. Inside the cabin, the oil lantern cast a golden glow. They played cards at the kitchen table. Luke teaching her a game his father once taught him. Eliza lost 3 hands and accused him of cheating. He swore he wasn't. She laughed, short, surprised by her own sound. It was the first real smile from either of them. Later, she brewed tea while he dressed a splinter in her palm. She wrapped a clean cloth around his old hand scar. "I'd rather die in mud," she said, "than live in silk chained to a man who sees me as a prize." Luke didn't argue. "You ever think about leaving this place?" she asked. "I did," he admitted, "right after Clara passed. But I couldn't. She's still here, in the dirt, in the walls." "That's not grief," she said. "That's loyalty." "No," Luke replied. "It's love. Man versus nature, the wolves." The dogs barked first. A deep growl outside the cabin door. The livestock stirred restlessly in the pen. Luke grabbed his rifle. Eliza followed, a lantern in hand. Wolves. 3 of them, lean, gray, hungry, drawn by the scent of weak calves and fresh meat. Luke fired a warning shot. The wolves scattered but regrouped fast. He and Eliza moved in tandem, closing the barn, checking the livestock, moving among the pens in the darkness. One wolf lunged close. Luke raised his rifle, fired, but too late. The beast clipped his arm before falling dead. He staggered back. Blood soaked his sleeve. Eliza dropped the lantern, caught him. "You're bleeding." "I've had worse." She pulled him back inside, sat him at the table, and went to work with needle and thread. His teeth clenched as she sewed. "I was a seamstress once," she said with a wry smile. "Better at this than weddings." Turning point, an impossible choice. Later, bandaged and weary, they sat on the floor near the hearth, knees almost touching. Eliza stared into the fire. You think people like us get second chances? Luke watched the flames dance. No, not always. She looked at him, disappointed. But sometimes, he added, you survive long enough to save someone else. Their eyes met. She kissed him, not with passion, but with weight. It was a silent vow, not of romance, but of understanding. A shared survival. A mutual scar. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. Outside, the wind howled again, but this time they didn't flinch. Cliffhanger. Luke rose to check the window. His face changed. He stepped closer, squinting into the dark. On the ridge, barely visible, torches. Half a dozen, flickering like red stars above the hills. Eliza moved beside him. Is it them? Luke didn't answer. He just reached for his rifle. The world was still dark when they came. A dull red line bruised the eastern horizon, but stars still hung over the prairie like cold, watchful eyes. 6 riders. Black silhouettes. They approached slow, deliberate. No rush, no fear. These weren't men chasing a girl. These were hounds sent to collect property. Luke stood on the porch, rifle across his chest, boots planted in the dirt. Behind him, Eliza stood in the doorway, hair braided tight, jaw set firm. The lead rider halted 10 paces out. He was thick-necked, cruel-eyed, and wore a long coat with silver buttons. A pistol rested easy on his hip. His name was Harlan Griggs, Bane's top enforcer. You've got something that don't belong to you, he growled. Luke spat. You mean the woman with a mind of her own? Harlan smirked. My boss paid good coin. Her daddy signed the contract. That makes her his. She ain't property, Luke said, stepping forward. And she sure as hell ain't yours. There was a long pause. No sound but the wind, the creak of saddle leather, the breath of horses. Then Harlan reached for his gun. Gunfire and fury. The climactic fight. Crack. Luke fired first. Harlan's shoulder snapped back with a burst of blood. The enforcer screamed, toppling off his horse. The rest drew fast. Gunfire exploded in the quiet dawn. Muzzle flashes lit the shadows. Dust and lead tore through the fence line. Horses reared. The old water trough shattered. Eliza ducked into the cabin and came back out with Luke's second rifle. She crouched beside a barrel and fired with practiced aim. One of the riders screamed, slumped in the saddle, and fell hard. Another charged the porch. Luke hit him center mass before the man could dismount, but they were outnumbered and surrounded. One of Bane's men tossed a lantern into the barn, another into the chicken coop. Flames caught fast. Luke, Eliza shouted. The fire. Smoke rolled across the ranch like a black tide. Luke grabbed her arm. We fall back, barn. Through the side door. They sprinted together, boots pounding the dirt, ducking behind barrels and troughs as bullets whizzed past. Reaching the barn, they slammed the heavy door shut behind them and pushed hay bales against it. Outside, fire roared. Man versus self, Luke's breaking point. Inside the barn, the smoke thickened, choking and bitter. The animals kicked in panic, eyes rolling white. Eliza worked to calm the horses, while Luke leaned against a support beam, blood trailing from a gash on his forehead. His rifle dangled loose in his grip. It's gone, he said hoarsely. The land, the house, every dream Clara and I built. He slid to the ground, coughing. Ash streaked across his face. I held on because I didn't know what else to do. I thought maybe if I kept it alive, I'd still have her. But now it's all ash. Eliza knelt in front of him, hands firm on his face. You gave me something no one else ever did, she said. A choice. My life was a prison, and you opened the door. Don't let them close it again. Her voice cracked. We fight. together. Luke stared at her, really saw her. A woman who once stood trembling in the rain, now fierce and unafraid, standing inside fire for the right to choose her own fate. He nodded and stood. Final stand, grit and guts. They saddled the only horse left unscathed. Eliza threw open the rear gate of the barn as fire licked the rafters above. Smoke blinded them. Heat seared their backs. And then they rode, bursting through flame and timber, into the pre-dawn dark like shadows on fire. Outside, 2 men tried to block their escape. Luke shot one. Eliza, teeth clenched, fired the second shot. Her bullet caught the man in the neck. He collapsed, twitching in the dust. They kept riding, toward the ridge, but Harlan waited there, bloody and enraged, pistol raised in one trembling hand. "Get down!" Luke shouted. Eliza didn't. She aimed, breathed, pulled the trigger. Harlan flew backward. His pistol clattered on the rocks. And then silence. No more bullets. No more screams. The surviving men scattered into the hills. Mercenaries without cause, without pay. The fire burned behind them, but none dared follow. Bittersweet dawn marriage by firelight. The ranch was gone. Blackened bones. Ember ghosts. Luke and Eliza sat on a rock ridge, overlooking the ashes. The wind was cold, but the sky was brightening. Sunrise edging over the mountains like a promise not yet spoken. Eliza shivered. Luke wrapped his old duster around her. They sat in silence until she finally asked, "What now?" Luke reached into his saddlebag, pulled out a small, worn Bible. Inside, folded between pages yellowed by time, was a sketch, drawn by Clara, a chapel beneath a cottonwood tree. He held it up. "No preacher," he said. "No church. Just us. Right here. Right now." Eliza stood. Luke followed. They faced each other in the rising light. And they spoke vows, not of love forged in storybooks, but of loyalty born in blood, fire, and the storm. They promised to walk forward, not alone. Luke said softly, "Married before dawn. Not bad for a man who thought he'd die alone." She smiled, eyes full of tears and sun. Poignant resolution, a new path. By midday, they were walking northward. The land behind them still smoked. The world ahead was vast and uncertain, but their steps were steady. A pack-horse carried the Bible, the sketch, and what little else they owned. They crossed a river by mid-afternoon, boots splashing in cool water, their silhouettes framed in the soft golden light. No land deed, no title, but they had something stronger, a choice, each other, and a reason to begin again. Final shot, the river. As they stepped out of the water, Luke turned once, looked back at the horizon, where black smoke curled into the sky like the closing chapter of another life. He took Eliza's hand. They walked on,